Growing up, I never felt like I belonged in my own family. My name is Michelle, I'm 20 now, and from as early as I can remember, I've been the outsider in a house that was supposed to feel like home. My older sister Emily, 5 years my senior, was the family's pride and joy. Straight A student, cheer team captain, daddy's favorite, mom's little angel. Everything she touched turned to gold, or at least that's how my parents made it seem. Then there was me, quieter, more introverted, obsessed with books, plants, art, and things that didn't interest anyone else at the dinner table. I wasn't rebellious or difficult, I just didn't fit. When I tried to connect, the door would shut subtly. I'd bring up something that excited me, a new graphic novel, a painting I finished, an anxiety attack I overcame, and they'd politely nod, murmur a few empty words, and turn the conversation back to Emily's latest achievements. After a while, I stopped trying. The silence wasn't loud, that's the thing. Emotional neglect rarely screams, it whispers. It seeps in. It makes you question your worth. It makes you wonder why your voice seems to echo in rooms filled with people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. By the time I was 18 and ready to start college, I made my quiet exit from the center of their universe. No fights, no drama, just distance. I started spending spring breaks with my grandparents instead of returning home. I found reasons not to attend family dinners. No one really asked why. No one reached out. No one noticed the growing space between us. Or if they did, they never said a word. And maybe that's what hurt the most. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from being forgotten not in anger, but in indifference. I wasn't the rebellious child who slammed doors and made threats. I just faded, and my family let me. My parents weren't cruel people. They didn't hit or scream, but they didn't listen either. They didn't see me, not the real me anyway. They loved the version of me they could tolerate, the polite, well-mannered daughter who showed up for birthdays and smiled in group photos, the placeholder, the background character in their picture-perfect narrative. Emily and I were never close. She was always center stage, rehearsing for the life my parents imagined for her. I was the audience, expected to clap politely and keep quiet if I had a different view. Our relationship wasn't built on sisterhood. It was built on distance, comparison, and quiet resentment. Still, I held on to the tiniest sliver of hope. Maybe one day they'd ask me about my art. Maybe Emily would call just to check in. Maybe I'd stop being invisible. But hope is a dangerous thing when it's unreciprocated. Looking back now, I realize I didn't drift away. I was pushed, subtly, quietly, and repeatedly, until I learned to walk alone. And the truth is, walking alone became easier than constantly proving I deserved to stand beside them. This story, though, isn't just about emotional distance. It's about what happens when long-standing wounds finally crack open, and someone else sees the pain your family refused to acknowledge. The real shift happened last Christmas. I came home for the holiday mostly out of obligation. My grandparents would be there, and I didn't want to disappoint them. As usual, I kept to myself, politely helping Mom set the table, answering small talk with short smiles. Emily, always the star, floated around the living room like a bride in training, which she was. She and Jonathan had been dating for years and were now engaged. Everyone said they were perfect for each other. Jonathan was kind, that's what struck me. In a house where I'd gotten used to lukewarm attention, his presence was refreshing. He asked about my art, actually listened when I answered. He laughed at my dry humor. It wasn't flirtatious, it was human. For once I felt like someone in the room saw me as more than a shadow. Apparently, that was a problem. Later that night after dinner, Emily pulled me aside. Her voice was sharp, low, and laced with accusation. "I know what you're doing," she snapped. "You've always been jealous of me. Now you're trying to steal my fiancé?" I blinked. What? I half laughed, thinking it had to be a joke. She wasn't joking. "You were way too friendly with him. I saw the way you looked at him, and the way he looked at you." I wanted to scream, not out of guilt because there was nothing to feel guilty for, but out of disbelief. After years of being ignored by my own sister, I was now being accused of trying to seduce her fiancé for, what? Smiling during dinner? I told her she was being ridiculous, that I had no interest in Jonathan, but she didn't care. Her insecurities had already latched onto an imaginary story, and nothing I said would unwrite it. The worst part? I didn't even get angry. I'd been conditioned to expect the worst from Emily. This was just another notch in a long line of subtle bullying disguised as family tension. I walked away from the conversation, holding back tears, not because of her accusation, but because I had been naive enough to think maybe things were getting better. I didn't hear from her again after that. No apology, no clarification. Months later, I found out about her engagement from my grandparents. She didn't call me, didn't text, just left me out of it completely. I was crushed, but not surprised. It felt like the final confirmation that I truly didn't matter to her, or to any of them. I told myself it was fine, that I didn't want to be at her wedding anyway, but deep down, it stung. I wasn't looking for a fancy invite or a special role, I just wanted to be acknowledged. Then, weeks before the wedding, I got a phone call from her. "Michelle," she said, barely making eye contact through the screen. "You're not invited to the wedding. I don't want you there. It's better this way. Jonathan has feelings for you." That was the moment my heart shattered, not because I wanted to be at the wedding, but because my own sister saw me as a threat, as someone to be removed, erased. I hung up the phone that night and stared at the ceiling for hours, not out of rage, not even sadness, just numbness. Because for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be cast aside by your own blood. It was a quiet Thursday evening. I was curled up on my couch with a cup of tea, headphones in, half listening to a podcast while working on a class project. My phone was face down on the table, vibrating quietly every now and then, but I ignored it. I figured it was another group chat blowing up over something meaningless. But after the fourth or fifth buzz, something in me told me to check. 7 missed calls from Dad. That alone was enough to jolt me upright. My father is the kind of man who assumes silence means you're busy. If he calls more than once, something is wrong. My heart dropped. I called him back immediately, my voice shaking before I even spoke. "Dad, what's going on?" His voice, trembling and breathless, was unrecognizable. "Michelle, you need to come, now." "What happened?" "It's Jonathan and Emily. Please, just come. It's all falling apart." I froze. After months of being ignored, excluded, and dismissed, suddenly I was essential. Suddenly my presence mattered. I reminded him, calmly but firmly, "Emily said she didn't want me at the wedding. She was very clear about that." There was a pause, then a whisper. "Jonathan won't marry her without you there." That sentence shattered whatever numbness I had built around myself. Before I could process it, another call came in. Mom this time, crying, pleading. She said my sister was having a breakdown, that Jonathan had caused a scene at the rehearsal dinner in front of both families. He'd asked where I was. When Emily told him I wasn't invited, he reportedly stood up, took a breath, and told the room he couldn't go through with the wedding. Not to someone who could treat their own sister like that. My mom's voice cracked. "Michelle, your sister needs you. Please, just come fix this." It felt so surreal, like I was watching a movie play out from behind glass. Emily, who had thrown me out of her life, now needed me to save it. Then the call came from Emily herself. Her voice was barely intelligible through the sobs. She was frantic, begging me to come to the venue and pretend it was all a misunderstanding. She wanted me to lie, to say I had chosen not to come, that it wasn't her fault, that she hadn't banned me because she was jealous or insecure. She wanted me to clean up the disaster she had created. I let her talk, let her cry, let her plead. And then I said, with a steadiness I didn't know I had, "Emily, this is the fallout of your own choices. I'm not your scapegoat anymore. I won't lie for you. I won't fix this." She screamed, said I was ruining her life. I ended the call. No anger, no yelling, just peace. For the first time in years, I felt calm. I turned off my phone, finished my tea, and sat quietly with my thoughts. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to twist myself into shapes to fit a family mold I never belonged to. And somewhere out there, Jonathan had seen the truth without me having to say a word. He'd looked around, watched how I was treated, and decided he didn't want to be part of that. For once, someone believed me, without me having to beg them to. The next morning, I woke to over a dozen missed calls and texts. My phone lit up like a fire alarm. Emily's friends, extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Even a message from a cousin who once told me I was too sensitive. Suddenly, everyone had something to say. They begged. They guilt-tripped. Some even tried intimidation tactics. But I stayed quiet. Then came the voicemail from Grandma, the only person in my family I still trusted. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Michelle, I just want you to know Jonathan's not answering anyone's calls. I think it's really over, and honey, I'm proud of you." That was the moment it really hit me. This wasn't just a wedding falling apart. This was the unraveling of a family's illusion. Jonathan saw through it all. Not because I said anything, not because I aired out all the cruel words, all the little dismissals, or the years of emotional distance. He figured it out by simply watching how they treated me. That one rehearsal dinner gave him a window into my entire life, and he chose to walk away. He chose truth over performance. And that felt validating. But what came next hurt more than I thought it would. Emily, the golden child, the flawless daughter in my parents' eyes, was spiraling. My parents weren't just panicking, they were blaming me. As if their daughter's wedding falling apart had nothing to do with her insecurity, and everything to do with the difficult sister who had dared to exist. They tried to spin it. "You knew Jonathan was into you. You could have just stayed away." As if I hadn't, as if they hadn't pushed me away first. They didn't want me there until it all fell apart. Then suddenly I was the missing piece, the one who could have fixed everything if I had just lied, played along, kept pretending. But I've done that my whole life. I'd sat through birthdays where my name was barely acknowledged, holidays where I was told to smile more even when I was drowning inside, family dinners where the conversation danced around me like I wasn't even at the table. I was tired of shrinking, and for once, someone outside of my little world, a man they all approved of, respected, chose to speak the truth. Chose me, not in a romantic sense, but in a moral one. He chose what was right. That day, I decided to stop asking for a place at their table. I blocked Emily's number. I sent one last message to my parents. "You made your choices, so have I." Then I packed a small bag, grabbed my laptop, and drove out to the lake an hour away. I needed air, silence, space to breathe and feel everything. For the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Not because I won, but because I stopped playing a game I never agreed to in the first place. And that was the beginning of something new. A week after the wedding was officially called off, I was still trying to process it all when the next wave hit. Emily had somehow gotten my new number. The first message came in just after 10 p.m. A single line. "I hope you're happy. You ruined my life." I stared at it, numb. No hello, no apology. Just blame. Then came more hundreds over the next few days. Texts from her friends calling me a homewrecker. Strangers tagging me on social media with cruel comments. Someone egged my car. Twice. My mailbox was smashed. My apartment door was scratched with the word snake. And all of it? Echoes of Emily's voice, this time amplified by a mob. At first I felt frozen, scared, alone. But then I remembered what Jonathan had said that night at the rehearsal dinner. "I won't be part of a family that treats someone like that." He saw me. He saw them. That truth became my shield. I installed cameras around my apartment, changed passwords, talked to a lawyer. I even reached out to some of the people who had messaged me with threats and saved every response. It wasn't just bullying anymore. It was criminal harassment. One night, I came home from class to find all 4 tires slashed on my car. Taped to the windshield was a note. "Stay gone." She was right about you. I recognized the handwriting. It was Emily's. That was the final straw. I gave my attorney everything, screenshots, camera footage, voice recordings, even the footage of her trying to break into my building. Her rage had escalated beyond anything I could have predicted. But I was done being her scapegoat. I was done cleaning up after the emotional messes of a family that had never protected me. The cease and desist letter went out the next day. She responded by trying to negotiate. Through her lawyer, she wanted me to drop everything if she paid for the damages. But this was never about money. It was about truth, about dignity. We took it to court. The judge didn't hold back. Between the attempted break-in, the defamation, and the hundreds of messages, Emily was slapped with a permanent restraining order, a mandatory therapy requirement, and a 1-year suspended sentence. I walked out of that courtroom shaking, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in years: power. When the news reached my parents, their reaction was exactly what I expected. "You ruined your sister's life over a few pranks," my dad said. "She's hurting," my mom added. "You should have just moved." Moved, like I hadn't already spent my whole life trying to disappear. That night, I changed my number again, deleted my social media accounts, and moved to a new apartment with 24/7 security. Not out of fear, but out of peace. I didn't want to be reachable to people who only knew how to hurt me. Jonathan never reached out again. I think he knew I needed distance from all of it, including him. And honestly, that was okay. Sometimes the people who wake you up aren't meant to stay. They're just there to open the door. And when they do, you walk through it and don't look back. After the court case ended, you'd think the dust would finally settle, that the hate would fade, that I'd be able to breathe without the weight of my family's judgment pressing on my chest. But when the headlines went away and the whispers stopped, something unexpected rose in their place: clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw just how long I had been groomed to accept their silence, their dismissal, their emotional absence as normal. It wasn't just about Emily or Jonathan. This mess was the culmination of years spent fighting to be heard in a family that only valued obedience, not truth. So when people asked why I wasn't trying to repair things with my parents, my answer was simple: they never tried to repair me. Growing up, I was the difficult one. The kid with emotions that made them uncomfortable. The one who asked too many questions, cried too easily, and needed more support than they were willing to give. And because of that, they labeled me dramatic, sensitive, selfish. They weaponized my mental health as proof of my instability. But therapy had given me language. It had handed me the tools to see what I'd endured for what it was: emotional neglect, dressed in polite smiles and backhanded compliments. And when I tried to explain it, my parents laughed it off. "This generation is too soft," my dad said once when I told him about my diagnosis. "Real people deal with stress," my mom added. "You're just not strong enough." I remember that moment clearly. Thanksgiving, 2 years before all of this wedding drama began. I had prepared a heartfelt speech, printed out statistics, and even brought pamphlets from my campus therapist. I was desperate to be understood. Halfway through my sentence, my dad interrupted me. "Michelle, stop making excuses. Start living in the real world." I went silent after that. That was the moment I stopped needing their approval. Or maybe the moment I stopped believing I'd ever earn it. Looking back, I understand how that dynamic fed everything that happened with Emily. The way they so quickly believed her ridiculous story. The way they parroted her lies without ever asking for my side. They didn't need facts. They just needed a villain. And I'd always been the easiest one to blame. But I'm not playing that role anymore. I've stopped trying to fix things with people who never noticed they broke me. I've stopped accepting emotional scraps and calling it love. I've started something new, a life I built for myself, with boundaries, real friends, and a sense of self-worth I never had before. Emily still hasn't reached out again, but my parents have. First, a birthday card with a generic "hope you're well" scrawled inside. Then a voicemail from my mom asking if we could meet for lunch. "Just to talk," she said, like nothing ever happened. But things did happen, things I'll never forget. I didn't respond. I deleted the message, not out of anger, but peace. Because this version of me, the one who doesn't beg to be included, who no longer shrinks to make others comfortable, that version deserves more than people who only want to sweep the damage under a rug. I'm Michelle, not the family scapegoat, not the problem child, not the emotional burden, just a woman who finally chose herself. And I'm never going back. It had been nearly 6 weeks since the court issued the restraining order against Emily. I was finally sleeping through the night again, finally walking outside without scanning every parked car, every window, every shadow. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid of my own sister. I thought that meant it was over, but when I woke up one morning to find 4 slashed tires and a note taped to my apartment door that read, "Run while you still can," written in Emily's distinct, loopy handwriting, it became clear, when people like her can't control you, they try to break you. I remember just standing there in my robe, coffee cup trembling in my hand, staring at the shredded rubber on my car and feeling that old tightness return to my chest. Not fear, not anymore, but heartbreak. Not because of the car, but because this woman used to braid my hair when I was 7 and scared of thunderstorms. How do you get from that to this? The police came quickly. I handed over the security footage like clockwork. Emily's face, clear as day, crouched behind a bush with a kitchen knife at 2:18 a.m. The officer sighed. She really doesn't care about the restraining order, huh? No, she didn't, because for people like Emily, rules only exist for other people. I called my lawyer that afternoon. We filed for criminal contempt and added the footage to the ongoing civil suit. She was charged within the week. You'd think my parents would be horrified, that they'd call and ask if I was safe if I needed anything. But no. I received a message from my mom, tone clipped and cold. Must you ruin your sister's life over a few silly mistakes? Silly mistakes, as if vandalism and threats were just quirks of an over-emotional bride. It was then I realized something chilling. My family never cared about who I was. They only cared about who they could make me out to be. And now that I wasn't playing their version of me, the dramatic, unstable, attention-seeking black sheep, they had to create a new narrative. One where I was vindictive. One where I was cruel. They started reaching out to my former high school friends, distant cousins, even some of my college classmates. Suddenly, I was getting flooded with DMS. Your sister says you lied in court. Is it true you're mentally unstable? Why are you tearing your family apart? It was a smear campaign. Emily couldn't reach me physically anymore, so she came for my name. And still, I didn't respond, because the truth doesn't need me to scream. It's in the court records, it's in the police reports, it's in the broken glass, the voicemail threats, the digital trail of abuse she left behind. What they didn't realize is that I've finally become someone they can't manipulate. I don't need their apology, I don't need their approval, and I sure as hell don't need their version of love. The fallout hit them harder than they expected. My aunt, who had always been quietly neutral, reached out last week. She said, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I didn't realize how bad it was until now." I didn't say much in response, just, "Thank you." Because that was enough. I'm not rebuilding bridges that were never real. I'm not cleaning up messes I didn't make. And I'm certainly not stepping back into a house where my pain was entertainment and my silence was expected. I'm Michelle. I'm still healing. But I'm done being the villain in someone else's fantasy. Let them live with the truth now. I remember the exact moment I realized I was finally free. It wasn't when the restraining order was granted, or even when Emily was sentenced. It happened in a quiet moment, sitting alone on my new apartment balcony, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, the city humming below me. The chaos was still there in the distance, but it no longer lived in me. After the court case closed and the civil settlement finalized, I expected silence. Instead, I got fury. Emily's friends continued their harassment online for weeks. DMS, rumors, comments under my work. My clients were spammed with fake reviews, and one even received an anonymous email calling me mentally unstable and dangerous. Fortunately, most of them knew better. One even told me, anyone who has a family that toxic and still walks in here with a smile, I'd hire twice. But the weight of it all lingered, not just the drama, but the years. The years I spent trying to be good enough for people who saw me as a mistake. The years they gaslit me into believing I was too much, too broken, too different. Therapy helped, but so did Mara. Mara was someone I met through work, a graphic designer who worked on the same client project. We clicked instantly, not because of shared trauma, but because she saw me. Not the black sheep, not the scapegoat, just Michelle. One night I told her everything. I expected her to back away slowly, maybe ghost me like others had when I got too vulnerable. But she just pulled me into a hug and said, "You never deserved any of that." It was the first time I cried in front of someone without apologizing for it. We started dating a few months later. She never asked me to forget the past, but she reminded me that I didn't have to live in it anymore. I changed my phone number again, closed all my old social media. I created new boundaries, not just from Emily and my parents, but from anyone who fed off drama or refused to respect my peace. My grandparents, the only ones who never turned on me, came to visit. They brought homemade cookies and cried when they saw my new place. "We're proud of you," my grandpa said, squeezing my shoulder, "not just for surviving, but for living." I think that's when it really hit me. I survived my family. I survived being called a liar, being made the villain in a story I never even wrote. I survived gaslighting, abandonment, harassment, and sabotage from people who were supposed to love me. But now I'm thriving. I got promoted at work. My freelance business is growing again. I started hiking, something I always wanted to do but never had the courage to try. I even adopted a senior rescue dog named Daisy, who snores louder than she walks and follows me around like a shadow. There's still grief, sure. Grief for the sister I thought I had, grief for the parents who couldn't love me the way I needed. But there's no longer guilt. That died the day Emily slashed my tires and my parents asked me to just move away instead of protecting me. They lost me, and I finally understand. That was their choice, not mine. So here I am, months later, writing this with peace in my chest and strength in my bones. If you're reading this and you've been the family scapegoat, the black sheep, the one blamed just for being different, I want you to know something. Walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. It's strength. You don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to say, enough. I did, and I'm never looking back.